So, Mr. Allen, how did you initially get involved with, looking at this experience through your lens?
I grew up in California, San Francisco. First, let me say this. I'd like to thank this band. When you guys hit, and when you guys hit, man, it brought tears to my eyes, man. Thank you. It's been a long time since I had been with a band, and to hear you guys hit, ooh la la, man, ooh la la. Okay, there. Oh, that's better. Yes. I was born and raised in California, in San Francisco, and I went to school in San Francisco. High school, undergraduate, and graduate school in San Francisco. And I moved to New York in 1978. And I had been in New York about 7, 8 months maybe. And then I moved to Harlem. And when I moved to Harlem, life on earth began as I know it. There's a parade every year in Harlem during the African American Day Parade, in which numerous black college bands perform. And the first time I saw Morgan State Marching Band on the streets of Harlem coming down the street, and I fell apart, literally. And so I would go back every year, and it never occurred to me that this was a national activity that belonged to a culture, that was specific to a culture, that was an activity that was to provide a service, not only for the public, but for the band members and for the students and for the participants as well. And I was looking for a way to continue working, to stay interested in photography and to keep investing in my particular interest with photography, which was to photograph African American culture as a global sensibility, as on par with all the other photographers whose work I respected and loved, i.e. Lee Freelander, Gary Winograd, Ralph Gibson, the owner, Cartier-Bresson, Robert Frank, all these people, Roy DeCarava. I'd come through this whole line of photographers. And the marching band revealed itself to me as a possibility, with me not knowing what I was getting into, literally. I thought that it would be a local activity because all the books that I had done, for the most part before that, except the book in Africa, the photographs from Africa, I had done locally. The Gleason's Gym was done in one room on 30th Street. Hats and Hat Knots were primarily done in New York, city streets of New York. News were done in a studio in New York City. When I began to photograph marching bands and realized that the bands that were coming to New York were bands coming from outside of New York, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., North and South Carolina, Florida. Then it went into Kentucky, Kansas, Tennessee, Texas. I began to realize that this would be my first opportunity to put together a vision that was a national consciousness, that would be an international sensibility. And so I first went to Newark, which is a pretty much African-American sensibility in terms of street visibility. And once I started moving around Newark, Delaware, Baltimore, D.C., it just opened up. And then I began to do research, hired a researcher who did a lot of the research for the book for me. And we began to travel around and photograph.
Let me stop you right there. So when I look at the pictures, they don't, they're very odd because they're not kind of the images I would imagine, like looking on TV, looking at the Battle of the Bands. There's something immersive about them. Would you talk about how you actually approach developing your vision within the bands?
Well, the vision from the bands is the same as the vision from everything else which I have learned to do. I work from what I like to call the inside out. I don't photograph something from afar as objective, formidable framing. I want an insight that's revealed through the imagery that is not obvious. What I like to call visual trinkets that you get when you look at a photograph I make. I hopefully try to include something that's personal in the work that identifies it as something particular through gesture, through light, through tone. And it took me about 6 months to get a rhythm going about a marching band. What was the consistent behavior of a marching band? And I had to learn to do that step, they do, that, and then they shift to and I had to learn to anticipate timing, that when drum major goes down, and in colleges, their head goes all the way back and touches the ground. It happens so fast that I had to learn to anticipate. So it's the anticipation, it's getting to know what are the characteristics of a marching band. And then you learn that it's not just about pageantry and celebration, but that it's about discipline and organization and preparation and practice and commitment. And that's when you start to get into things that reveal the information that hopefully I was able to provide that you don't normally see.
You see, Jules has a very broad educational background, and it's not based in photography per se. He's been involved in criminal justice,
in California.
In California, and making artwork. So when he talks about these things, when he talks about these ideas and concepts of how he integrates himself into a position to be transparent and seamless within an experience, it's because of these multiple layers of consciousness. Now, would you talk a little bit about your kind of background in that area?
I have an undergraduate degree from San Francisco State College in photography, fine art. I have a master's degree in psychology, and I have a master's degree in fine arts from Hunter College in New York City. I've worked as an outpatient psychiatric social worker, diagnostic evaluator for the state of California. EGADS is right. And I've traveled. I think one of the things that's really helped is that traveling and being interested in the consciousness of what you're photographing. I come out of a school where the unconscious approach to photographing as an apparent approach is fascinating. I come out of that school of defining moments, but I was interested in who a character of people were that I hadn't seen before. That there's this opportunity because of an activity that's applied that would reveal something more than just at random images or images of people in suffering. I wanted to know what were the characteristics of a culture that was active, that was directed, that was disciplined, that was organized. How was I going to photograph that and make that interesting as well? And the marching bands seemed to be an ideal moment once I got into it, because I didn't understand how organized a marching band is. That for those young people to do what they do, they have to practice, and they have to show up on time, and they have to discipline themselves. One of the most interesting lessons I was given was at Morgan State when they allowed me to spend time in the practice room, and everybody was there, and they're young students, and they're smart, and they're hip, and they're beautiful, and they talk a lot of trash. Then the band director tapped the music stand with his baton, and instantly the room sat up, got quiet, and was attentive with the discipline, and then the door opened and a student walked in 45 seconds to 60 seconds late. And the band director said to him, "Mr. So-and-so, turn in your uniform." And I was like, what? And not a sound was made by the students, no reaction, no response or obvious feelings about. It was understood that this is about discipline, that this is about preparation, that this is about maturity and responsibility. And one of the things that I've tried to do is show that this is an organized activity, and that it's also fun, and that it's visual. I got in trouble. The New York Times wrote a 2-page article on the book, which was really helpful and beautiful and celebratory. And the writer said to me, "Jules, is there anything about a marching band you don't like?" And I was being cavalier, and I said, "Yeah, I love everything about a marching band except the music." Well, I shouldn't have said that. But there's so much more than the music in a marching band that is required of these young students. I mean, they have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, they practice, and they march in the rain, and and on the East Coast, it's a whole different thing than sunny California.
Yeah. So this project took, as an actual project, 5 years. Would you talk a little bit about how you, kind of edit the work? And because when you go through the book, there's a continuity to the work. And it doesn't seem like there's a time difference between it. It just seems like it's all happening at the same time. How do you keep that thread going through the work over the course of 5 or 6 years?
I've developed a visual sensibility that's mine. I can say that now. I can approach photography in the way I approach photography. It's no longer this or that or this or that. It's what I want. It's how I can organize a frame and how I can execute a photograph. First of all, I have an editor who you give them a body of work and they edit much clearer than I can. Let's be clear about that. I'm known as the worst editor of my own work. But I have a wonderful designer. I have a wonderful editor. We have a wonderful publishing company that we started in the college where I teach. So we control everything. We raise the money. But what I would do periodically is I live in New York City when most of my friends are artists and musicians. And unbeknownst to me, I began to show photographs to musicians. Henry Threadgill, Avery Brooks, all these people I know who are wonderful. And they were all in marching bands. All these guys that I know who are musicians in New York, who are great jazz musicians, were all in marching bands. Many of them who are as conceptual or as avant-garde, if you want to say, all are rooted in marching bands. There's a parade in New York, in Chicago, the Bud Billiken Day Parade. 80 bands march in that parade. And it's an extraordinary day in Chicago. And half the musicians I know in New York from Chicago were all in that marching band parade with one high school or the other. And they all played instruments that were different than the instruments that they are playing as professional musicians. I mean, I'm talking to a great piano player, and he says, "Oh yeah, man, I played clarinet in the band." Right? Like what? The work was being edited and reinforced by musicians who would look at the work and say, "Oh yeah, man, you're on. That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it."
But you talk about discipline. So on the non-academic side, on the benevolent side of marching bands, that is really one of the key elements for community development from the benevolent marching band groups, is creating discipline for those kids, giving them a place to go that is outside of some of the things that may take them down the wrong road in their own, community. It's about discipline. It's about focus, and it's on both sides. That activity, the discipline, works in different ways in the academic situation as in the community situation.
Well, the thing about a marching band, the culture of marching bands is there's so many different variations of a marching band that we often don't know anything about. I mean, you have the sports marching band, a football season marching band, or parade marching, but then you have ceremonial marching bands. You go to New Orleans, a second line band is a whole nother thing. I mean, New Orleans raises money with marching bands today for different causes in the community. I mean, the second line bands are incredible. And the bands in New Orleans that I was photographing are completely different than the bands from colleges.
I want to ask one last question about your design sense. Because I would like to note that, Jules says that, he's learned how to shoot kind of stealthily, because when you're on the street, you can't just kind of, be fast and shoot somebody's face. You got to kind of be stealth and get the shot, and that he knows the frame when he's shooting, no matter where the position of the camera is. Why don't you talk about your design sense, especially looking at these three pieces? The sense of light, the sense of form, the sense of relationship. They're really abstract, but they are so focused, and they really tell a story. So,
well, the approach to photography for me, we were talking about it last night. The approach as I get older has changed. I mean, it was stealth and speed. When I was younger, I was fast as greased lightning. I mean, I was, I say that as an approach, not a reality. I quick enough to step in and step out without being seen or alarming. And as I have gotten older, and as I continue to decline, I don't see any reason to be less effective. So what I've learned to do is photograph differently. I mean, I still make the same photographs, only I move a lot slower. And I found out it's even more effective than it was when I was faster. I raise the camera. I can be standing right in front of you, and I just go up like this. You don't even know I photographed. And that's new, and it's working very well. The form of my photographs, the design is based in drawing. I can't draw, but I draw. I practice form. With the marching band, because they celebrate themselves, you didn't have to worry about bringing the camera up in front of them and them reacting negatively, because they're celebrating themselves. So oftentimes when the camera went up, there was this pose or this embrace, yes, take my picture. But a lot of it's, I know form, and I've learned human behavior. I learned how to read human behavior. I've learned how to make decisions about human behavior based on real information that I can put together to decide what I'm looking at is legitimate or not. And I try to be direct with the information that I photograph. I mean, I want you to see something there. I'm not just taking a picture because something is there, but there has to be something there that I'm photographing. And to this day, always, I was taught by my teachers, the image is framed before the camera goes up often. I mean, I can see. And when I look at most people today, I look in frame venues, and I look in contrast tones, and I look in black and white.
I think that's a good place for us to stop. We'd like to take some questions now, but thank you very much, Jules.
Thank you.